up in Oklahoma, in Chattanooga, Oklahoma. It's just a small town. And our history, I mean, there was nothing indigenous taught except maybe, Thanksgiving. Each one of these tribes has their own criteria on how they enroll their members. Some tribes are lineage, but for the Comanches, you have to at least be 3/8 blood quantum to be enrolled as a Comanche. I went to the University of Oklahoma. I was a psychology major, and I started backing up my classes with Native American Studies classes, and it was an eye-opener for me. I got my bachelor's in Native American Studies, and I went on and got my master's in Native American Studies. I am a Quanah Parker descendant. I'm a great-great-grandson. Easiest way is Quanah was my grandfather's grandfather. I get to portray Chief Quanah Parker in the play. Personally, it's an honor to be able to be part of that production and portray Quanah, and I feel it's a educational platform. I get to talk a little bit about the Comanche history, our origin, how we got to this part of the country and where we're at now. Whenever Indians see each other, they can kind of tell what tribes they're from or what part of the country they're from by certain things that they're wearing. And there's certain things that I'm wearing that are signature to Comanches. I'll start with my moccasin. We usually have a V-type or parallel lines on the top of our foot, and mine are beaded. I have them decorated in cones. We usually have a medallion, but my medallion, I took them off. Our leggings were known to have this flap. It's called a save. I'm wearing a Beatsquina or the black apron, and these are some of the things Comanche men are known to wear. And my breastplate, it's made from hairpipe bone. We just try to get the bones the same size, whittle them down, hollow them out, and string them together. I was told the Comanches started utilizing this item whenever we encountered the Spanish. The Spanish came to this country on a quest for gold. They had the Spanish armor. We didn't have the armor, and this is what we constructed in our own way, that as well as a choker. And it's just a form of protection. My headdress, it's a Plains article that we wear. I mean, even from the north to the south, the Plains Indians will wear a headdress or a war bonnet. Usually a war bonnet's reserved for a person of leadership or warriors. I can legitimately wear this war bonnet amongst my people. I'm a veteran, served 20 years in the Marine Corps and did 4 combat tours, and that's what allows me to wear this. My grandmother, she was probably one of the last fluent speakers of our Comanche language. There's still others now, but she was, one of the very few. I know words. Probably there was a time I knew a lot more than I do now, but because it was whenever I was around my grandmother and she would talk it to my sister and me. And, it's one of those things, you either use it or lose it. But here currently, our tribe is doing a lot to preserve our language. The different communities, they have their language classes pretty much every week. So it's kind of on the rise. This is probably the most teaching of it that I've seen in my whole lifetime. We've always had a language preservation department, but now it's going more out to the communities. So that's a good thing. Like my grandma always told me, you're going to know who you are and where you come from. And I started learning that from a young age, and it's been kind of drilled in my head, me and my sister, this is who you are, this is who we are.
I'll give you a greeting in Comanche, how about that? Mreawe, Nananiatsa Leslie, Amarillo Naitana, Na Namana, Fisher Na, Dasa Parker Na. And that's, hello, my name is Leslie. I'm from Amarillo. My relatives are the Parker clan and Fisher clan. So I've been taking classes online, trying to learn how to say the alphabet properly to become closer to my ancestors, to get back some of that culture that colonization has taken away. The kids couldn't speak their language. Like my grandma, she could understand it, she could speak it a little, but she didn't teach any of her kids. She didn't teach her grandkids. She didn't pass it down. because of the residential schools.
Chilocco Indian School was one of them that she was in. Since Mother had gone to boarding school, all the time, she didn't learn to speak it, Comanche fluently. She could understand it because my grandmother would talk to her a lot of times in Comanche. She knew words, some phrases, but that was about it. The white man wanted to take the Indian out of everyone. So they weren't allowed any of their native ways. They weren't allowed to speak their native tongue. They had to do everything the white man way and speak his language.
They were heavily disciplined, and I use discipline lightly. Abuse would probably be a better word to get them to not speak it, even in the dark of night when they're all alone with each other. Don't even say it when you're saying your prayers. Them trying to essentially eradicate the natives. Easiest way to do that is take away how they talk to each other and make them assimilate. Cut their hair, take away their traditions, their culture, their family units.
I am half Comanche Indian. It was my grandpa's mother, Awitaqua, who was Quanah's second wife. She separated from Quanah when he settled down, bought the Star House and settled in with the wives. She was one that had left him, and she had bought some farmland, some land in Apache. And then that's where my grandfather grew up. That's where my mom grew up there in Apache.
My grandma started going to powwows when she would tell people she was born Native again.
She became a member of the intertribal organization they had here in Amarillo for a while. And she would attend powwows. She would go to reunions. I mean, she started being more involved with things that involved her culture.
Getting to go to the powwows, hearing the drum, hearing them sing, it just touches your soul, and it's a whole different experience. And that's when I realized, yeah, this is me. This is a part of me.
I am actually wearing her regalia. All of this was made for her when she became a member of the tribal organization and started getting involved. And it's a way for me to honor her, to wear her regalia. The breastplate, of course, is for protection. And then the shawl it's kind of a covering, because if you go into a circle of one of the powwows, you can't enter unless you have on your shawl, unless you happen to be one of the dancers.
When I wear my regalia, it's almost like I'm putting on another person. And I have nothing to be ashamed of. Till that imposter syndrome sets in. And you start going, no, you're not really Native. But I am. So sadly, you have to have a card to prove that. You can't just go, yes, I'm Native American, I'm a fourth Comanche. Everybody wants you to prove that you're Native. So wearing that regalia, you forget all that, especially when the drum starts and you're in the circle and you're dancing and everything else just melts away.
When's the time you felt most Native American?
When I danced at the powwows. It's just that feeling it just gives you to be out in that circle with all of them. It's a great feeling. You just feel, I don't know, like one with the circle. Like all of your ancestors are there with you. You feel a closeness, and it just kind of brings you together with all of the others.
Wanted to honor my grandma and make her proud. You start to learn, the facts and the books that you can read that were, of course, not written by natives. So you learn all these facts and you think you know your stuff, and then you get around a native and you realize, oh, that's not exactly how it was. So that gap in there is just, it almost, what's the word? It almost makes you want to give up. But then that native proudness comes back and you're like, no, they already tried to kill us off. We're still here. So they thought they buried us, they just planted seeds.
Long before this land became America, the land was inhabited by many tribes across Canada, the United States as we know it today, and down into Mexico. And so the bison roamed free all the way from Alaska down into the grasslands of Texas, into the northern part of Mexico, across into the basin area, and then the Appalachian Mountains. So throughout Canada down into Mexico, you have these places that are known. They have found the bones and the debris of bison that have gone over the cliffs. I know that kind of sounds a little bit harsh, but at that time, that was their only means of killing a large group. And they found a cliff. They would go ahead and stack rocks, almost like an airport would line the runway with lights so that the pilot would know exactly where to put the plane. That was pretty much what happened on the flatlands leading up to the edge of the cliff. They would have either rocks stacked in rows on each side, so that the runner would take the herd right in between those rocks over the cliff. Most of the tribes chose a runner. Now this runner had to be very fast to get ahead. They would either put a bison hide on, or sometimes even a wolf hide. And they would try to get the attention of the herd. So once they get the attention, the runner just kind of walks with either the buffalo hide on, because sometimes they might think that it was another buffalo that was there, another bison that was there, and they would follow it. And then after a while, as the person got closer to the cliff, they would start running. And then they saw the rocks lined up, they stayed right in between, and usually when they jumped, they would jump either with the bison or veer off to the side. Most of the time they found a cliff that had a ledge underneath, and as they jumped with the bison, the runner would land on that cliff or that little ledge underneath and scoot themselves all the way back as those beasts, the big huge mammals, went overhead down below. And down below were the people waiting, and then the butchering would begin. I think the Hopi lands are a little bit more isolated. The Hopi Reservation is about an hour's drive from Holbrook and Winslow north of I-40, a little bit more isolated. But it was a rich area. I lived with my father and my saya, that means grandmother in the Tewa language. They gave me the foundation of what was to come. Storytelling all the time. Every time you walked into somebody's house, there was a story going on. It was all around me. My name is Eldrina, and that is my English name. My Tewa name is Kuulutsawe, and it means blue corn. It was given to me by my grandmother on my Tewa Hopi side. She was the descendant of Nempeo, who is known in the art world as the one that helped revive Hopi pottery. And so my gift to the world is not molding with clay, but molding my words. My father retired from the Santa Fe Railroad because of an accident. He had to learn how to use his muscle movement and basically who he was all over again. And people used to tease him quite a bit, and unfortunately I became a part of that group of people until my saya, his mother, sat me down and asked me, "Do you know your father's story?" That was something that my saya taught me all the time. And she used that with me with a lot of other people. Have you taken time to hear their story? So today, what I do was kind of came from that. The stories are told, the songs are sung, the dances are done in honor of everything that we have been given throughout the ages. And so not just the bison, but everything else that comes along with it. And I really thought this was very clever. I really liked this because this is the tale of a bison. And so when you're out there, whether it's the Caprock Canyons or Yellowstone or over there around Lawton, Oklahoma, if you're there and you see the bison's tail go up, that's his signal you better get away because I'm getting ready to charge.
Well, storytelling is culturally significant from the beginning of time. If you go back to ancient sacred texts, for the Bible example, those stories are what we remember. Moses parting the Red Sea becomes something real to us. It's a story. My name is Trudy Hansen. I'm a retired professor of communication from West Texas A&M University. I was lucky enough to begin the tradition of an annual storytelling festival here at WT, and I'm also serving as the National Storytelling Network chair of the board. As families, you're able to give your family members a sense of who you are, where you came from, and what can happen in the future.
You see, one day, Coyote was walking across the land, and he happened to notice that off in the distance, there was a little boy that was standing at the kind of the mouth of a cave. And he thought to himself, well, that's strange. Why is that boy over there by himself? Well, about that time, he noticed that there was a monster getting close to the cave, and that monster was herding in some of the last herds that he had gathered up and placed in the cave for himself. He was very proud when he put the last herd in. He said, now I have all of the buffalo that I need to eat. I have all of the bison that is for me only. Now the little boy, as he stood there, he looked very sad, and Coyote went ahead and gathered a meeting between all the other two-legged people and animals and birds. He told them about what he had seen, and many of the hunters said, that is why we haven't been able to find the buffalo anywhere. There must be something done about this. But someone spoke up and said, yes, but there's a young boy with him. We can't go and attack when there is a boy with the monster. We'll have to think of something else to do. And so Coyote thought about it, and he said, you know, the boy is probably lonesome, probably needs a friend. Maybe if we find someone that can go and befriend the young boy, then you can release the buffalo from the cave. Visually, my Saya and my dad's world, they just took over my whole creativeness. I was surrounded by creative people when I lived with them. Many a times when I was in their two-roomed house, you'd walk in, it was the living room by day and bedroom at night, and then our little kitchen right through this door. And we had an outhouse that we used. And because of all of those things, stories just happened. Experiences happened. So I was surrounded by that.
Stories do pass down generational information, but the main thing is that they connect. There was an article written in the Tejas Storytelling Newsletter years and years ago, and it talked about storytelling as a vessel. And when it's a vessel, it carries the meaning and culture that you were brought up in to those who come after you, those that you want to remember. But storytelling is also a bridge. In that same article, it talks about the fact that there are often communities that are separated by differences, but our stories can bridge those differences.
It is said that the bison, when they started to disappear on the land, the people didn't know what was happening. So maybe a lot of the stories that we now tell today, and many of the Plains tribes tell today, had something to do with that.
You'll find storytelling in every culture. One of the things that I often shared with my students was the concept of magic numbers. And they said, what does numbers have to do with storytelling? If you think about the tales that we learned from Germany and Northern Europe, think of the stories that you heard as a young child. You heard 3 little bears, you heard 3 little pigs. Why 3? And then you look at the culture and see that that 3 was a symbol of the belief in God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost. If you look at the number 7, 7 is considered in Jewish culture to be the perfect number. So if you look at Jewish fairy tales, you'll find often that there will be 7 used somewhere in the story. And when you get to Native American culture, the magic number, I would tell my students, is 4. It's not 3, it's 4, because Native American culture is based on the concept of the elements. the four winds, the four seasons. And you see that in all the stories that you hear.
When the woman got up to leave and she headed out of the circle to the north, when she stepped out of the outer circle, they said that she laid down on the ground. And when she got up, she was a black buffalo calf. And then she laid down again. And when she rose up, she was a red buffalo calf. And the third time when she laid down and she got up, she was a brown buffalo calf. And last and fourth, she laid back down. And when she arose, she was a spotless white buffalo. And then off she walked.
Imagination is at the heart of storytelling. And so storytelling allows you to paint the picture in the minds of your audience. You are the one who are crafting the picture the audience sees. They aren't, you are. You help them see the sky as you want to. Or if you're telling the legend of the white buffalo, you help them see the buffalo. You help them understand the reverence that Native people have for that particular animal and how that affects the story that they tell.
Many of the tribes said when White Buffalo Woman came back again, that was going to be the one that would indicate that it was her as that calf would turn into colors. And so, you know a little bit of the story behind the White Buffalo Calf Woman and why today that buffalo, whenever they are born, they're not albinos, they are true white buffaloes, calves that are born, and they are honored still to this day among many tribes throughout the United States.
The largest herd I've managed is about 3,000 head. That's quite a spiritual experience when you're in the presence of 3,000 buffalo. There are certain things that you learn when you're around buffalo. You don't have to even have the ancestral relationality with the buffalo and understand them the way I do in order to see what kind of beings they are. Many people who came to visit the herds when I managed them, one of the very first things they would say is every time a buffalo looks at me, I feel like she's piercing my soul with her eyes. And that's my daily experience, right? To this day, after 32 years now of managing these herds. A lot of people will say, you know, you'll hear natives say that buffalo are relatives of ours, so they're family, they're considered family, and that is true. But with the buffalo, it goes a little deeper than that. They're actually spiritual elders. So you can have, you know, you have your aunties and your uncles and grandfather, etc. Those are all relatives. It's a different type of relationship when you're talking about somebody who's a spiritual elder. So for us, the buffalo helped guide us onto the surface of the earth and across the surface of the earth. The buffalo helped us to survive in harsh conditions, the harsh conditions of the Dakotas and the Northern Plains in general. And then she goes deeper in terms of what she teaches us about how we ought to live our life. You know, they're able to look deeply into other people's souls and spirits and kind of know whether you're someone they can trust or not. And know where you are as a person and what sort of healing you need in your life in order to become the fullest version of yourself. So when you sit quietly with a buffalo herd, you really explore the deepest parts of you in many ways, right? You explore your fear, right? You explore perhaps your own personal weaknesses, but also your strengths. So as they kind of peer into your soul, there's a lot of personal knowledge that is gained from that.